Your homepage is the primary single source for how you talk about your company and what you're building. You get eyeballs on it daily. Internally, your teams use it to get on the same page about the value of your product and how to talk about it. It's the one place you can go in order to understand who are you for and what are you building for them. And yet, there is so much that's still wrong with homepages today. Leading with vague outcomes like drive revenue, leading with vague benefits like AI powered. When you have multiple personas, talking to the wrong persona or talking to all the personas at once. There's little mention of functionality. The list goes on. So, how do we turn a bad homepage into a good one? And why does this work matter so much? This is Modern Startup Marketing. I am your host, Anna Furmanov, and we are in season 4, where I'm asking a lot of why questions to help bring more clarity to the messy world of early stage startup marketing.
If you're at an early stage startup, you're in the right place. Every startup begins bootstrapped, pre-seed, or seed, and that's such an exciting time, but also a really challenging time. 50 to 90% of early stage startups don't make it. We should be able to get our startups over the hump and without guessing or throwing spaghetti. Marketing is an important part of your go-to-market strategy, but you need to understand the why behind the what in order to get clarity, make the right decisions, and get results. Welcome to Season 4, where I'll be asking why in order to help bring more clarity to the messy world of early-stage startup marketing.
Anthony, thank you for joining me. I'm so glad that you don't hate me after the LinkedIn post back and forth where I clearly was doing too many things at once that one day. And I'm like, what did I just say in the comment? But you don't delete comments on social. You leave them because that's a no-no. You don't delete comments on social because, anybody could take screenshots like, wait a second, what just happened there? So sorry about that. There was that really confusing thread. But thanks for joining me. So Anthony Pierri helps founders market hard to market products. I want to talk about that for a second. Like, what does that mean? So you're the co-founder and partner at FletchPMM, and you focus on homepage messaging. You're really focused. I really admire that about you. It's very hard to focus for people, for companies in general, and you're very focused. So homepage messaging, other website messaging too, I believe, right? And I love how you have like this flat fee. It's like $7,500, or I think for startups, $5,000 or something like that. I saw on your website. So flat fee, homepage messaging, right? And also, if you're a product marketer, you can access their best practices docs for just $50 a year, which is great. So let's talk about hard to market products for a second. What are some examples of hard to market products?
So in our view, great intro, by the way, and never hated you. I don't even remember exactly what our interaction was because I'm getting in probably multiple feuds per day on LinkedIn. So I can't keep track of all my enemies. No, I'm just kidding. So hard to market products, from our perspective, it's when people create a product that can be used in many different ways by many different people. And that presents an exciting opportunity for VCs and the promise of a massive total addressable market, but it also creates a marketing challenge. How am I going to market a product that can be used by anyone for any number of reasons? And most founders, the way they try to do it is by not getting specific and staying broad and trying to find unifying themes that are shared by an enterprise company in logistics and an SMB retail bank. And they say at the end of the day, they're all just trying to increase their bottom line, so work with us and we're going to boost your revenue. And that type of messaging is going to fail in a marketing context because it's so generic, so undifferentiated, and ultimately just like fluff that we would send. If we got a cold email, someone saying that, we send it right to the trash can. And so in general, the hard to market piece comes from that horizontal nature of this really flexible software, which most software is a lot more flexible than we give it credit. And so that's the double-edged sword of it.
Yeah. Is that kind of like I'm using Riverside for podcasting, but other companies might use Riverside for just creating video in general, or right? So that's just like one example, but multiple use cases sort of depending on who your target buyer is, and it might be multiple target buyers, but your product essentially, maybe even like project management tools. I see that, right? A little bit more where you're managing projects, but what kind of project is it? Is it a design related project? Is it a finance related? Like everybody needs project management, right? So they turn it into and use it the way that they see the most value from it, right?
Yeah, and you gave some good examples. I actually would put Riverside in the not that hard to market category because they really have focused down on the specific use case of recording a podcast over the internet with multiple people. And they've thought through all the elements to make that not a nightmare, right? It's recorded locally on both people's machines. So if the internet goes down, they allow you to, I think in the latest versions, you can create social posts directly from it. So they focus in on this use case, which actually makes it incredibly easy to market, which is like you can find people who are doing podcasts, whether through content or whatever you want to do, but you can market against that use case and say, isn't it hard to make a podcast over Zoom, right? Like you guys both log in the Zoom and then, the file's not good or someone was talking over it. That marketing material is super easy. The project management one, I think, is a lot harder. And that's actually hard for a slightly different reason, but still a hard to market product. It's just a very, very crowded space at this point. So anyone coming in, you have to say, well, why would I use you over using Asana or any of the other 99 project management tools? Like really, what can we do at this point with project management to really take it to the next level? We see a lot of startups who come with some sort of large language model or some sort of fundamental technology change that allows them to speak to all these different use cases, and it creates challenges. So we worked with a company. They're like Series B now, but they basically were able to, they were like Zapier on steroids. It was like any company process between multiple different softwares and tools, we can automate it. Anything that's too complex that you think could never be automated, we can automate it. Right there, cool value prop, but so vague. If I go to anyone in any company and say, do you have a complex, hard to automate workflow? It's like, maybe, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like me and my partner, we call each other in the morning at the first, beginning of work, and we're writing stuff down, and then maybe we'll log. Like, is that a workflow? I mean, I guess, is that what you would? So the vagueness from the broad value prop, where in reality, people might shop for that solution much more specific. They'd be like, I'm looking for something to automate my Shopify store. Whenever I get a Shopify order, I want to let the distributors know at the warehouse or something like that. That would be more specific. But because they're so horizontal, they don't want to be known as the Shopify automation tool. They want to be, we can automate anything, which creates this conundrum of how do you actually talk about it? How do you get it off the ground without being able to run, hundreds of different marketing plans at the same time?
Totally. What I find so fascinating about this is like, we're not even talking about difficult to do sort of like, okay, strategic narrative or category design. And like, we're so categorically different. We're just talking about, can you let people know what it is you're offering, who you're for, and what's your differentiated value? And that's it. And that's still tough because that's what your whole business, Anthony, is built on, helping companies that are having a hard time with this, right? So I find that sort of fascinating. So I want to cover a few questions with you. What do you think is wrong with so many homepages today? And I think I know what you're going to say because I've been following your content on LinkedIn, but I want the listener to hear this. And I think it's really helpful to just, touch on this. I think this is something that you like to talk about a lot. So what's wrong with homepages today?
I'm going to try to give a slightly different version of my answer to make your podcast have a nice, unique angle. If anyone has heard me other places, it won't be like I'm just a broken record.
Love it.
We're trying to learn new stuff as we keep working with companies and new ways to explain it. Another angle at the traditional thing that I talk about, which is people are primarily leading with outcomes, vague outcomes, rather than explaining specificity under it. That's one of the big problems. But a newer problem that we have realized is that startups especially when they're trying to message, they have to know who they're messaging for, and not in the sense of target customer, but where they are in the overall technology adoption lifecycle curve. So people have seen the bell curve where it's the early adopters on the left, right? The technology enthusiasts, the early adopters. That's like the early market. And then that whole crossing the chasm idea, which is those early adopters like you for one reason, but then the rest of the market are much more pragmatic. They're very risk averse and they're skeptical of new technology. They don't want to have to deal with all the mistakes that come with it. So the way you talk to those two groups is very different. And most of the time when startups come to us, they are trying to cross the chasm, but the way that they're messaging is to the first side of the market. They're speaking to visionaries, and so it's more of a imagine all the possibilities of this new technology. We've created this product. Imagine all the ways that it could be used to make your business more competitive, more compelling. And so like those outcome messages that, in my opinion, make it really confusing for what the product actually does, those outcome messages that we harp on and saying this isn't helpful, in a certain frame of reference, they make sense. Because if I'm trying to sell a visionary person, I am trying to sell the outcome of you're going to get this competitive edge that no one else has in the market. And a risk, like a friend of risk person, like a visionary who's not risk averse, they're looking for tools that are unproven, untested, and new that will give them that edge that no one else has. Give me ChatGPT way before anyone else. And I'm going to run my whole business on this LLM before anyone else mainstream is doing it. Like we're the first adopters. We'll figure out the best use cases. And so marketing to them of like, here's the possibilities of this technology feels really cool and compelling. But then the problem is the pragmatic buyer is not like that at all. They actually are saying, I don't want to use you. I actually have no interest in adopting what you're selling, but out of necessity, I will consider you because I have this problem that is so hard to solve. We've been solving it kind of halfway. It's not working. It's breaking at the seams. I might get fired if we don't solve it. And so out of that necessity, I'll take the meeting with your rinky-dink startup that has hardly any credibility because word on the street is you might be able to solve my problem. So that's the biggest problem we see is most startups are use case agnostic. They're broad. Imagine the possibilities, get this competitive edge, that type of messaging, which works really well in founder-led sales where the founder is talking to other visionary people in their network, right? Most founders are in some sort of entrepreneurial networks with people who are really, really visionary. And so when they're just pinging people they know, they're pitching how cool the software is and their friends are getting excited. The friends of their friends are getting excited. And then when they go to actually try to market the product, they're like, well, what worked in the sales calls? And they're pulling from the data that they've seen, which is sales calls with not pragmatic buyers, with visionary buyers. And then they say, well, let's put it on the homepage. And then they're very surprised when all of a sudden, nobody cares about the vision. Nobody cares about this possibilities. And so when we always come in, we say, you got to take that vision, that high level vision, you need to shrink it down, make it use case specific, and find specific use cases that have deep, deep, deep pain points for the buyers and market against that. And that right there, that change is so difficult for founders that I would say it's at least in the top 3, maybe top 5 reasons that startups fail is founders are unwilling to shrink the vision in order to get the product in front of actual customers who might buy it. And it's a deep thing.
Yeah, I actually go through this with my clients. I think positioning, and I've heard this from startups time and time again that come on the podcast, clients that work with me, positioning and messaging is the hardest, no matter what size you are, because you're constantly, like you said, the early adopters, and then you've got your crossing your chasm, and then the people that are, pragmatic. You're constantly iterating. You're trying to get it to kind of fit depending on where you are in your startup life cycle. And that's hard. And so that's something that I help my clients with and we'll talk about kind of like what I help my clients with, because there's a question coming up about what you think about it. I'm just curious, but I think this is great. Like, it's hard to take your vision, shrink it down, and you just hit spot on, like what's wrong with so many homepages today. Can you give an example of a recent client, maybe someone you're working with now? You don't have to call out who it is, but like what their vision, what they were using as their messaging, and how you helped them and how you changed it, just to give something that's a little bit more concrete.
Yeah, that's a great question. So this was a client that we worked with a little while ago. Essentially, they were in the HR tooling space, and they were pitching the visionary outcome message. And it was very much become a more modern, people-focused HR organization, all sorts of stuff like that. And it was really trying to push this forward-facing vision of how you can really drastically change it. The funny thing was you could scroll 4 or 5 scrolls sections of the site and have no idea what the product is, right? No mention of a use case, no mention of functionality, just vague outcome language top to bottom. So we were working with them, and what we really tried to do is shrink that down and find where's a pain point that we could theoretically wedge our way in with these companies. And so what we uncovered through our workshops was that they loosely fell into this rewards and recognition software like category. And that's a well-known software category, not well-known if you're not in HR, but essentially like when you're in a large enterprise and it's your 1 year anniversary and then a little bot in Microsoft Teams pops up and says, hey, Anna, congrats on 1 year. Here's a $25 Amazon gift card. And you're like, okay, like this is supposed to make me feel like a really, valued employee and really excited about it. So what they did is they're taking a brand new tack that is basically realizing that the most meaningful feedback you get is from your manager. And managers in these large organizations are really busy and a lot of times have too many people that they're managing that it's hard for the manager to meaningfully recognize the employees. So what they did is they said, we actually take rewards and recognition and make it easier to come from the manager. So it becomes like the manager's little assistant that reminds the manager, hey, Sarah hasn't been recognized in the last 3 weeks. Do you want to give her a shout out? And then it would also encourage team members to shout each other out, that if they were part of the platform, it was like a Slack bot. It would basically be like, hey, give Anna, you can send her kudos or something. I can't remember exactly what the functionality was. But the way that we reworked it was around this problem of rewards and recognition is really not doing its job. The stuff we're paying for in our HR tooling is just not helping. And people don't like it. They feel underappreciated. And there's this other side that managers are too busy. So we helped them rework the message, and it was way more targeted, way more like stop sending your employees impersonal gift cards, like empower the managers to actually recognize them throughout the week. And we basically listed out the features and functionalities that say like, this is how we help managers do this, right? We give them prompts and we're showing specific screens on the product and stuff. And they're very early stage. So we don't always like to talk about like, work with us for conversion rate optimization, because most early stage startups we're working with have nowhere near the volume of visitors to even run one statistically significant A/B test. But like anecdotally, they were like, more people are converting on this site. Talk track is working way better in the sales calls. And it was really shrinking it down and trying to find that one point of entry rather than imagine all the possibilities. And hey, are you struggling with this specific problem? We make it way better. And here's exactly how we do it.
Yeah. Since I work with early stage startups, the way we handle things after the fact is like, do people get it? Is there like that moment of like, we don't have to talk about what it is 200 times because they get it quickly, realize if it's for them or not, and move on, right? And so that really is kind of the way to feel out is your positioning and messaging landing? Are people confused? Because what happens usually before is like you get on sales calls. I've either heard these recorded calls or I've been on these calls myself, depending on my client, who I work with. And sometimes the person on the other end is like, they've heard everything. They're like, so what's your bread and butter? And when you hear that, so what's your bread and butter? They're confused. Something's wrong. Something's off, right? So great example. Thank you for that. So we're in season 4, Anthony, of my show, and I can't believe lots of episodes. I've been focused more on the why questions. Why kind of ties back to strategy versus the what tactics. Tactics are great. I think they have a place, but I like to dig deeper and ask why questions. Why are we doing it this way? Why, just kind of question status quo stuff. And I've been working with early stage startups for 4 years now and developed this systematic approach. It's called MASS, Method, Marketing as a System. MASS rhymes with SaaS. And so it's got 10 steps, or it's got like 3 parts. The first part is I come in there like kind of a fractional head of marketing, work on voice of customer research, positioning, right? A lot of similar stuff probably that falls on your plate too. Positioning personas. The second part is the website. We usually work on the website. And then the third part is the go-to-market strategy. And then after that, they either want me to help out a little bit, but usually they will either the founders take it on themselves or they'll hire someone full-time. So I'm curious, why did you decide to focus on the homepage message or like other website pages, but really focused on your homepage for the past year? We were just chatting before I pressed record. Why does this work matter so much?
Great question. So we came out of a custom service agency that did ongoing, longer term scoped work, mapping out how many hours of each employee is it going to be. And that business model it can work, it's just really hard. And it has to grow mainly through referrals. Thank goodness the founder of the company was kind of if I can swear, a badass, and had all these connections and was constantly growing the network and landing new clients. But ultimately, it was always a game of managing how much people we have on the bench versus how many we have on projects. And so we were spun out of that agency as a experiment. Can we find a way to do one thing the same over and over and over, rather than custom service being productized, picking one problem area, solving it over and over and over again, getting really deep expertise in that little slice, ideally to get clients through marketing, not through word of mouth. And so we started there, and we had a loose hypothesis of what we think that might be. We thought we wanted to do positioning and we wanted to do startups. And to some people, hearing just those two things, they're like, oh my gosh, how incredibly narrow. But in hindsight, I'm like, that's super broad. Because first of all, what does positioning mean? Does that mean running a 2-hour workshop? Does that mean interviewing a bunch of customers and, developing a sales playbook? Like, positioning is a broad category. And then what's a startup? Is that a 2-person pre-product, someone in the garage, or is that a multi-thousand person company that's about to IPO? Like, those are both technically startups, right? So we started with this broad message and then used content on LinkedIn as a way to try to find what are problem areas that people are struggling with. And so as we're testing different types of content to see what resonates, we started to say, well, how can we evaluate other people's positioning? And we immediately turned to the most obvious places to look for how a company talks about themselves. The primary one being the homepage. So we start giving these breakdowns in our posts about homepages. And we're trying to reverse engineer what do we think they're thinking go-to-market and positioning wise that would lead them to put this on their page. And so we do critiques, we do suggestions, we point out good examples, bad examples, compare them against each other. And we start getting people asking us, well, can you just help us rewrite the homepage? And we're like, well, this is strategy work. This is, we're not copywriters, we're not designers, we're not, layout people. We don't know any of this stuff. But people kept asking, can you help us do the homepage? Help us do the homepage. So we ended up falling into this problem area, which we could have tried to put ourselves in the conversion rate optimization bucket. We could have put ourselves in the copywriting bucket. But ultimately, since the beginning, we've seen it as a product marketing problem. Anyone can grab a template off the internet. What's your solution? What problem do you solve? The hard thing is knowing which problems to talk about, for whom, and why. And depending on how does that fit into your broader go-to-market strategy. So when we come to the homepage, we're coming at it from a product marketing angle, which is probably that's our more unique wedge, other than the specificity that makes it so we're easily memorable and people think about us. But at the same time, we do think that the homepage really is, for especially early stage companies, it's the primary single source of truth for how you talk about your company. The whole product marketing messaging that usually lives in a 50-page Google Drive, document that's in a folder inside of 5 other folders that's supposed to be guiding how the sales team and the marketing team are all talking about things. It's just not a reality for smaller companies. So we're like, if you can get the homepage right, it's going to align everybody, because everybody can point back to it and basically say, no, that's the problem we're solving. That is the target customer we're going after. So we think it's really important because it really is the barometer of your strategy. It's the broader question. So doing that thing of shrinking it down to just homepage allowed us to kind of have our cake and eat it too. Because all we ever want to do is talk strategy, right? We want to get in a room, talk about their go-to-market, talk about the challenges, all the high-level business stuff that makes it so fun. actually, surprisingly, the best way to get those conversations repeatedly is to shrink down the product that you're selling to the point where it's like, we're just rewriting your homepage. And when you attach it to all the strategic stuff, they're like, okay, I need to get the homepage off my to-do list for Q1, right? Like Q1, we're launching a new homepage. We just raised a round. We're going to start sending all this, spending marketing dollars to bring leads to the page, and it has to be good. And so they're like, well, how can we do our homepage? We're struggling because we have all these different features now, and our product's more complicated. We're going after more segments, and then we appear, and we're like this unicorn that can do both these very specific weird things. And at that point, there really is another competition. You could go to a general purpose marketing agency that does a bunch of stuff. You could go to a design agency. You could go to like a go-to-market strategist, but no one is solving that problem of, in that specific context, from that angle for that group of people. So we rarely ever are pitted against anyone else. Maybe it might have happened once where they were like, I'm trying to decide between you and one other provider.
It was me, Anthony. It was either you or me, Anthony. No, I'm just kidding. No, but you had mentioned the 50 slide deck that like whoever looks at that. I work on a deck. It's called the Marketing Foundation deck, but it's 10 slides.
That's better.
So it's not 50 slides. Yeah, it's way better. And it helps me and the team kind of orient around like everything related to what you just talked about. And it helps us put together the website, like the homepage and all that stuff. So that then, of course, I think the website, since it's so important and it's just out there in public, you can come back to it. It's so easy, right? Then everybody sort of uses that as their frame of reference. But yeah, I do work on a deck. It's not 50 slides, but it's 10 slides. So that was funny, I thought. But we didn't have time for this, but I wanted to ask you, usually I like to ask my guests, what burning question do you have for me? And what I'm going to do, since we don't have time for me to answer it right now, is answer it in a bonus episode that I usually put out on Fridays. So what question do you have for me, Anthony?
I would love to know, what was the most surprising thing you've learned from doing a podcast for 4 years? Like what was, when you started the podcast versus till now, what's something you're like, I never realized, either something about the process or some sort of result or just something about it? I would be very curious to know, because we've considered doing podcasts, as I was saying before. We haven't taken the plunge, primarily because people say it's really hard and takes a lot of commitment and time. And
don't listen to what people say. People told me not to do my business model. Like, don't work with early stage startups. They have no money. When I was starting out my business, don't listen to what other people say, because everybody has their own set of expertise, right? They have their own experience. They have their own point of view, and you have your own, and you're skilled at certain things. So don't listen to what other people say. I will answer this question in a bonus episode. It's a really good one. By the way, you did a podcast and it averaged 11,000 downloads per episode, and we didn't have a chance to talk about this.
The short answer is, it was with a friend of mine who had a newsletter, and we had a whole business idea behind the podcast. It was basically going to be taking people's existing newsletters, repurposing them into podcasts where you would read, you'd get a reader, you'd get music. And this was like the test podcast, and it went really well. And I ended up parting ways with the company, but I actually think they're still loosely going after the idea. And I think they just landed their second newsletter that they're converting into a podcast. And so that was a whole entrepreneurial side in the past, but probably a topic for another day.
Yeah, but you did it, and there's something there, Anthony. So, all right, thank you so much. I loved having you on here. I'm so glad that you're not mad at me for that LinkedIn post that one day. And so if anybody wants to find Anthony, you can go to LinkedIn, Anthony Pierri, and you can find FletchPMM by going to FletchPMM.com. Thank you once again, Anthony.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks for listening to this weekly episode of Modern Startup Marketing. New episodes are dropping weekly, so make sure you're following wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on LinkedIn, search for Anna Furmanov, visit my website to learn more about how I help early stage startups, go to furmanovmarketing.com, and don't forget to leave a review if you're loving the show.